He didn't say anything more then, but he gazed thoughtfully down on the pale hunter, as if that strange individual was one to infinitely respect, but never to comprehend. Kevin's wounds healed quickly, but it took him several days before he felt well enough to make the ride back to White Slides. He had to return, but he was reluctant to do so. Memories of Dylan Standish haunted him, and when he tried to forget, they kept coming back. This feeling was almost like an augmentation of his gloomy foreboding, which always lingered on the edge of his consciousness. However, one morning he started early, and riding slowly with many stops, he reached the Sage Valley cabin before sunset. Moore spotted Kevin from afar and let out a hearty yell of both delight and concern. Kevin was clearly exhausted, but Moore helped him off his horse and got him fed and into bed. Moore was thrilled at the opportunity to return the favor, saying, "Boots on the other foot now, pard, say you're all shot up, and it's I who'll be nurse." Kevin asked if Moore had any news from down below, and Moore replied that he had been meeting with Lem every night. He then shared Burley's version of Kevin's fight with the rustlers in the cabin. According to the sheriff, old Devin Standish had a peculiar reaction to the news, offering no praise for Kevin's victory. Dylan Standish, who had returned from Kremling, was also present and lost a significant amount of gold to the cowboys while gambling recklessly and seemingly hating the gold he lost. The cowboys were concerned about Daisy, who had not been seen much lately. The next day, Kevin was up and caring for himself, and he told Moore about the fight and how he had terrorized Standish into making promises. Moore was convinced that Dylan Standish would not keep his promises, saying, "Never in God's world will Buster Dillon live up to those promises. I know him, Ben. He meant them when he made them. He'd swear his soul away, then next day he'd lie or forget or betray." Kevin was not so sure, saying he had known bad men to change and that there was a grain of good in everyone. Every now and then a man rises from the ashes of his former self to achieve greater things. This could be Standish's opportunity to reveal his true character. If he doesn't have it in him, he'll do as you say. But if he does, that fright he experienced could be the turning point in his life. "I'm hopeful, but also apprehensive," expressed Moore. "Ben, just wait and watch," replied Moore with sincerity. "I'm not one to give up hope on my fellow man. You've taught me to believe in the higher things. But human nature is what it is. Dylan can't let go of Daisy, and neither can I. It's not just love, it's self-preservation." The day arrived when Kevin ventured down to White Slides. He felt a feverish sensation in his blood, which he attributed to his injuries rather than his mental state. It was a sunny Sunday with alternating gusts of wind and rain. The hill's sagebrush glistened, and the air had a sweet scent. The cowboys welcomed Kevin warmly, but the old rancher, who spotted him from the porch, immediately retreated into the house. Only Kevin noticed this lack of hospitality. Shortly after, Daisy emerged, waving her hand and running towards him. "Dad saw you. He asked me to come out and apologize." "Oh, Ben, I'm so thrilled to see you. You don't seem hurt at all. You had quite the brawl." "Oh, I was worried sick, but let's forget about that. How are you? How's Wills?" She chattered on until she was out of breath. "Daisy, it's fantastic to see you," Kevin replied, feeling the familiar intense rush that came with her presence. "I'm doing pretty well. I wasn't too badly injured, but I bled a lot. And I'm definitely older than when I used to patch up gunshot wounds like it was nothing. Every year takes its toll. It's just that a man doesn't realize it until later on." "Howdy, Daisy," Ben greeted her with a smile. But her blue eyes turned cloudy and her sweet lips trembled. "I'm not happy, Ben," she said. "But what did we expect? It could be worse. You could have been killed. I have a lot to be grateful for." "I reckon we all do," Ben agreed. "I got a message from Wills, but I'm not sure if I should tell you." "Please do," Daisy said, her voice wistful. "Wills says to tell Daisy that he loves her more and more every day. His love gives him courage and strengthens his faith in God. And if you ever marry Dylan Standish, you can come visit his grave among the columbines on the hill." Kevin couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of comfort as he watched Daisy's emotions shift from rosy to white. "It's true, Daisy," he said. "It'll kill him just like it'll kill you." "Cheer up, Daisy," Ben said. "It's still a long way until August 13th. Now tell me, why did old Devin run when he saw me coming?" "Dad thinks you want to tell him some terrible story about the rustlers," Daisy said. "Uh-huh. Well, not yet. And how's Dylan Standish been acting these days?" Kevin knew the gravity of that question, but he didn't need confirmation from Daisy's face. "My friend, I hate to tell you," she said. "You're always so hopeful, so quick to see the good instead of the bad. But Dylan has been rough with me, almost brutal. He's been drinking every day, sometimes just a little, sometimes more. But it changes him, and it's dragging Dad down. He doesn't say it, but I can tell he's afraid of what comes next. Dylan's been pressuring me to marry him right away. He's eager to leave White Slides, and that worries Dad." But of course Kevin refused. The presence of Daisy, so vivid and sweet and stirring, and all the sunlight surrounding her, including the golden gleams on the sage hills, transformed Kevin's heart, brain, and spirit. It was as if what had been beautiful with light had suddenly strangely darkened. Then Kevin imagined he stood alone in a gloomy house, which was his own heart, and he was listening to the arrival of a tragic messenger whose foot sounded heavy on the stairs, whose hand turned slowly upon the knob, whose gray presence opened the door and crossed the threshold. "Buster Dillon didn't break off with you, Daisy?" asked the hunter. "Break off with me?" "No, indeed. Whatever possessed you to say that?" replied Daisy. "And he didn't offer to give you up to Wills Moore?" questioned the hunter. "Ben, are you crazy?" cried Daisy. "Daisy, listen, I'll tell you," said Kevin as the old urge knocked at his mind. "Buster Dillon was in the cabin gambling with the rustlers when I cornered them. You remember I meant to scare Buster Dillon within an inch of his life? Well, I made use of my opportunity. I worked up the rustlers. Then I told Dillon I'd give away his secret. He made to jump and run, I reckon, but he hadn't the nerve. I shot a piece out of his ear just to begin the fun. And then I told the rustlers how Dillon had double-crossed them. Folsom, the boss rustler, roared like a mad steer. He was wild to kill Dillon. He begged for a gun to shoot out Dillon's eyes. And so were the other rustlers, burning to kill him. Bad outfit. There was a fight, which I'm bound to confess was not short and sweet. There was a lot of shooting, and in a cabin gunshots almost lift the roof. Folsom was on his knees, dying, waving his gun, whispering in fiendish glee that he had done for me. Upon seeing Dillon, the anger that boiled inside him caused him to shake uncontrollably, resulting in blood being splattered all over. He took a deep breath and tried to steady his gun, but failed miserably. In the end, he missed his target and fell over dead with his head resting on Dillon's lap. The red-bearded rustler, who had been hiding behind the chimney, was the only one left standing. Dillon watched the rest of the fight, and it must have been nerve-wracking for the young boy. Ben, on the other hand, broke the rustler's arm and knee before hitting him twice in the hip, causing him to hobble out to his finish. The rustler had shot Ben up quite a bit, making him look like a hair-raising sight when he approached Dillon. He made Dillon believe that he was going to murder him, causing the boy to beg and cry while praying for his life. It was sickening, but it was what Ben wanted. Eventually, he made Dillon swear to free his hostage and give her up to Moore. Daisy was horrified by the story that Ben had just told her. She shuddered and whispered, "Oh, Ben, how awful. How could you tell me such a horrible story?" He replied, "I wanted you to know how Dillon came to make the promises and what they were." She scoffed at the mention of promises or oaths to Dillon Standish, calling him a cowardly liar. Without saying a word, Kevin marched towards the porch with heavy, deliberate steps. He didn't seem to be in a hurry, but he wasn't moving slowly either. Daisy followed him, calling out in surprise, "Ben, where are you going?" He didn't answer, nor did he acknowledge her presence. Instead, he approached the closed door of the living room and opened it without knocking. With a powerful and rude hand, he strode in and closed the door behind him, leaving Daisy outside. Devon Standish stood leaning against the stone chimney, looking stoic and unyielding. He seemed to have been anticipating an unwelcome visitor. "What do you want?" he asked gruffly. He had sensed trouble from the moment he saw the hunter approaching. "Standish, I reckon I want a lot," replied Kevin, "and I'm asking you to make sure we're not disturbed. Bar the door." Kevin secured the door, then removed his hat to wipe his forehead. "Do you see me as an enemy?" he asked curiously. "Speaking honestly, Kevin, I don't see any reason why you'd be my enemy," Standish replied. "But I have a feeling. It's not just because I'm taking my son's side, it's something else, something I've never felt before. I first felt it when you told the story of the Gunnison feud." "Standish, we can't escape our destinies," Kevin said. "And it was written long ago that I was to tell you a worse and harder story than that." "Well, maybe I'll listen and maybe I won't. I'm not making any promises these days, Standish said. Are you going to make Daisy marry Dillon? Demanded the hunter. She's willing. You know that's not true. Daisy is willing to sacrifice love, honor, and even her life to pay off her debt to you, Standish replied. The old rancher's face turned red with anger, and a spark of his earlier spirit blazed in his eyes. Kevin, you can go too far, he warned. I appreciate your good intentions, but this is my business. You have no right to interfere. You've done that too much already, and I believe Daisy would be married to Dillon by now if it weren't for you. Uh-huh. That's why I'm thanking God I came to White Slides. Standish, your mistake is thinking your son is good enough for this girl, and you're making mistakes about me. I'm sorry to interfere, but trust me, I have every right to do so, said Kevin. Your talk is strange, Kevin, but I'll let it slide, replied Standish. You don't have to, I stand by my words. But before we continue, why don't you share some of the love you have for your no-good son Buster Dillon with Daisy, suggested Kevin. Standish's fists clenched as he glared at Kevin. Anger surged within him. He recognized Kevin as a bitter opponent to his cherished hopes for his son and his stubborn pride. By heaven, Kevin, Standish began. Standish, I can make you eat those words, interrupted Kevin. It's just you and me now, and I can take you on any day, understand? Don't talk about Dillon as if he's untouchable. It's not possible, argued Standish. Then hear me out first. Your son Dillon will ruin Daisy, to say the least. Do you see that? Kevin demanded. By God, I'm afraid so, Standish groaned in defeat. But it's my last bet, and I'm going to play it. Do you know that marrying him will kill her? Asked Kevin. What? You're exaggerating, Kevin. Women don't die that easily, Standish replied. Some do, and Daisy is one of them if she ever marries Dillon, warned Kevin. Well, she's going to, Standish declared. We don't agree, Kevin said curtly. Are you trying to run my family? No, but there's a big if in this game, and you have to admit that, Standish retorted. Standish, you're making me mad. You're not meeting me as a man-to-man. You're not the Devon Standish I once knew. Your name's known all over Colorado as the best of the best. You're supposed to be fair and generous, but you're so blinded by your love for that wild boy that you're a different man when it comes to him. I don't want to keep pointing out his flaws. I'm here for Daisy. She doesn't love him, Kevin argued. She can't do it. She'll only drag herself down and die of a broken heart, said the rancher's son, Kevin. The rancher was furious. I've shot men for less than what you've said, he bellowed. Kevin wasn't afraid. I reckon you have, but not men like me, he retorted. I'm telling you straight up, this marriage is a fool's deal. It's a damn selfish one and a dirty job to put on an innocent, sweet girl. If you go through with it, you'll ruin 4 lives. 4? Exclaimed the rancher. I should have said 3, leaving Dillon out. I meant Daisy's, yours, and Wills Moore's, Kevin clarified. I have a hunch that Moore's life is already ruined, he added. The rancher was taken aback. You can get hunches you never dreamed of, Standish, old as you are, and I'll give you one presently, but we're drifting off. Can't you keep cool? Cool? With you ranting hell-bent for election? You're locoed. You always struck me as queer, the rancher retorted. And if you'll excuse me, I'm getting tired of this talk. We're as far apart as the poles. And to save what good feelings we both have, let's quit, he added. Kevin wasn't done yet. You don't love Daisy, then? He asked calmly. Yes, I do. That's a fool idea of yours. It puts me out of patience, the rancher replied. Standish, you're not her real father. Kevin dropped a bombshell. The rancher was stunned. No, I'm not, he admitted. If she were your real daughter, your own flesh and blood, and Dillon Standish was my son, would you let her marry him? Kevin questioned. Well, Kevin, I reckon I wouldn't, the rancher answered. Then how can you expect my consent to her marriage with your son? Kevin asked. What? The rancher exclaimed in disbelief. Daisy is my daughter. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He leaned forward, his gaze piercing into the face and eyes that bore an uncanny resemblance to Daisy. By God, that's the secret, hell-bent Kevin, and you've been on my trail. He stumbled back into his big chair, his face firm with conviction. Kevin took the chair opposite, his likeness to Daisy fading away. It had been love, a spirit, a radiance, a glory, but it was gone, and Kevin's face became the emblem of tragedy. Listen, Standish, I'll tell you, the ways of God are inscrutable. I've spent 20 years trying to atone for the wrong I did Daisy's mother. I've been a prospector for the troubles of others. I've been a bearer of their burdens. And if I can save Daisy's happiness and her soul, I reckon I won't be denied the peace of meeting her mother in the other world. I recognized Daisy the moment I laid eyes on her. She favors her mother in looks, and she has her mother's sensitiveness, her fire and pride, and she even has her voice. It's low and sweet alto, they used to call it. But I'd recognize Daisy as my own if I'd been blind and deaf. It's been over 18 years since we had the trouble. I was no boy, but I was terribly in love with Lucy, and she loved me with a passion I never learned until it was too late. We came west from Missouri. She was born in Texas. I had a roving disposition and didn't stick long at any kind of work. But I was looking for a ranch. My wife had some money, and I had high hopes. We spent our first year of married life traveling through Kansas. At Dodge, I got tied up for a while. You know, in those days, Dodge was about the wildest camp on the plains. My wife's brother ran a place there. He wasn't worth much, but she thought he was the perfect match for her. It's strange how blood relations can't see the truth about their own people. Anyway, her brother Spencer had no use for me because I could tell how slick he was with the cards and beat him at his own game. Spencer had a gambling partner, a cowboy who had run out of Texas named Cap Full. But no matter about his name, one night they were swindling a stranger, and I broke into the game, winning all they had. The game ended in a fight with bloodshed, but nobody was killed. That set Spencer and his partner Cap against me. The stranger was a planter from Louisiana. He had been an officer in the rebel army. He was a high-strung, handsome Southerner who was fond of wine, cards, and women. Well, he got to paying my wife a good deal of attention when I was away, which happened to be often. She never told me. I was jealous in those days. My little girl you called Daisy was born there during a long absence of mine. When I got home, Lucy and the baby were gone. Also the Southerner. Spencer and his partner Cap and others they had in the deal proved to me, so it seemed, that the little girl was not really mine. So I set out on a hunt for my wife and her lover. I found them and I killed him before her eyes. But she was innocent, and so was he, as came out too late. He had been indeed her friend. She scorned me. She told me how her brother Spencer and his friends had established guilt of mine that had driven her from me. I went back to Dodge to have a little quiet smoke with these men who had ruined me. They were gone. The trail led to Colorado. Nearly a year later, I rounded them all up in a big wagon train post north of Denver. One of my wife's brothers, along with her father, had come out west, and by chance or fate we all ended up meeting there. We got into a family argument, and my wife refused to forgive me or speak to me, and her family took her side. I made the mistake of assuming that her father and other brothers belonged to the same brand as Spencer, and in doing so I wronged them and my wife. What I did to them, Standish, is a story I'll never tell to anyone who might repeat it, but it drove my wife nearly insane, and it turned me into hell-bent Kevin. She ran away from me, and I trailed her all over Colorado. The last sign I had was of the burning of a prairie schooner by Arapahoes as they were returning from a raid on the UTEs. The little girl may have wandered off the trail, but I think she was hidden or dropped by her mother or someone fleeing for their life. Your men found her in the Columbines. Standish took a deep breath. What a man never expects always comes true. Kevin, the girl is yours. I can tell by the way you look at me, and I can feel it. She's been like my own. I've done my best according to my conscience, and I've loved her, even though they say I couldn't see anything but Dylan. You'll take her away from me? No, never, was the sad reply. What? Why not? Because she loves you. I could never reveal myself to Daisy. I couldn't win her love with a lie, and I'd have to lie to be false as hell. False to her mother and to Daisy and to all that I hold dear. I'd have to tell Daisy the truth about the wrong I did her mother and the hell I brought upon her mother's family. She'd be afraid of me. Uh-huh. You'll never change, I reckon, exclaimed Standish. No, I changed once, 18 years ago. I can't go back. I can't undo all I hoped was good, replied Kevin. Do you think Daisy would fear you? Asked Standish. She'd never love me as she loves you or as she loves me even now. That is my rock of refuge, said Kevin. She'd hate you, Kevin, replied Standish. I reckon, and so she must never know, Kevin said. Well, life is a hell of a deal. Kevin, if you could live your life over again, knowing what you know now and that you'd love and suffer the same, would you want to do it? Yes, I love life with all it brings. I wouldn't have the joy without the pain. but I reckon only men who've come to our years would want it over again," replied Kevin. "Well, I'm with you there. I'd take what came, rain and sun. But all this you tell and the hell you hint at ain't changing this deal of Dylan's and Daisy's, not one bit. If she remains my adopted daughter, she marries my son. Kevin, I'm haltered like the North Star in that," said Standish. "Standish, will you take a day to think it over?" appealed Kevin. "I will, but that won't change me," replied Standish. "Will it not change you to know that if you force this marriage, you'll lose everything?" asked Kevin. "Everything? Ain't that queer talk?" "I mean you'll lose your son, your adopted daughter's chance of reforming, and her hope of happiness. These ought to be all in life left to you," explained Kevin. "Well, they are, but I can't see your argument. You're beyond me, Kevin. You're holding back like you did with your hell-bent story," Standish said. Ponderously, as if the burden and the doom of the world weighed him down, Kevin got up and faced Standish. "When I'm driven to tell, I'll come. But once more, old man, choose between generosity and selfishness. Between blood ties and noble loyalty to your good deed in its beginning," Kevin said. "Are you willing to give up this marriage for your son so that Daisy can be with the man she loves?" the rancher asked. "You mean Wilce Moore, your young friend and a rustler?" "Yes, Wilce Moore. He's my friend, and he's a man like you and I have never been." "No," the rancher yelled, his face turning purple. Kevin left the room with his head bowed and his steps slow. Kevin made his way back to Moore's cabin, walking slowly and distractedly. When he entered, Moore jumped up with a start. "Oh, Kevin, is Daisy dead?" "No, Daisy is fine." "Then what's wrong?" "Nothing yet, but something is going on in my mind. Moore, I'd like you to leave me alone." At sunset, Kevin paced the aspen grove on the hill. The trees cast sunlight and shade, and the sage slopes were a rosy gold. Twilight fell, and the stars shone bright. Night fell upon the valley, and the hills were cloaked in darkness. The blue sky overhead deepened and darkened. Kevin listened to the sounds of the insects, running water, and the wind. A coyote cried out, and the owls hooted to each other. A wolf mourned. These sounds only accentuated the wildness and loneliness of the night. Kevin felt the loneliness and wildness of the place, and he peered up at the mysterious sky with its deceiving stars. All that had helped him through days of trial seemed to have disappeared. As he gazed up at the majestic dark peak standing boldly and sharply against the sky, Kevin didn't feel any sense of strength returning to him. Instead, he felt mocked by nature's cruelty. His struggle wasn't with the forces of nature, but with mankind, the most perfect of nature's creations. He was in the throes of a passionate conflict with his own ideals, which seemed to be slipping away. He had faced this crisis many times before during the long and strange ordeal of his penance, but he had always been defeated by his own primal instincts. Despite his gloomy mood, Kevin's intelligence had not yet given way to his passion. He knew that Daisy and Moore were both fine examples of human nature, representing youth, hope, and progress towards a better future for all. He believed in the goodness of mankind, in the potential for a brighter future. But all of this seemed to be in vain, as Daisy's sense of duty, Moore's noble character, and Kevin's own efforts to guide them were all overshadowed by the selfish pride of an old man and the depravity of his son. It was a conflict as old as life itself. What good were Daisy and Moore's virtues, their victories over the headlong desires of love, or Kevin's spiritual guidance and eternal hope, when faced with the unchangeable passion of old Standish and the evil of his son? Kevin knew he couldn't play the role of a god, punishing sinners with death. But he had often been an impassive force of destiny, meting out terrible consequences. And now he was deeply involved in this tangled web of pain, remorse, and idealism, which seemed to be reaching its cumulative end. Yet even as hope began to fade, Kevin couldn't help but hold on to the possibility of a better future, where the virtues of Daisy and Moore might someday be rewarded and fulfilled. Kevin struggled with the realization that he couldn't change those around him. He couldn't make Dylan Standish a better person. He couldn't convince the old rancher to abandon his selfish ways. He couldn't show Moore the value of hope and virtue, and he couldn't save Daisy with his ideals. As the night wore on and Kevin trudged through the rustling aspens, the sounds of insects, owls, and wolves slowly faded away. The shadows of the trees blended into the darkness of the night sky, where the pale stars burned cold and indifferent, watching over other worlds of mystery. In those long, dark hours, something inside Kevin died, but his unquenchable idealism, the very essence of his being, found its fulfillment in a distant future. The gray light of dawn crept over the eastern horizon, pushing back the blackness of night until the valley and slopes were shrouded in a spectral light that made everything seem unreal. But with the dawn came a resurgence of the giant in Kevin's mind, the morbid and brooding spell that had haunted him for so long. He knew he had to tell his story to someone, to unburden himself of his crime, his remorse, his agony, and his endless striving. His steps had led him to his daughter's home, but the burden he carried was too heavy for him to bear. He crouched under the aspens, his shoulders bowed, his breath labored, his muscles cramped, and his heart beating slowly and heavily in his ears. His veins were filled with a creeping cold, his marrow with ice, and his soul with death. The giant that had been shrouded in gray threw off its cloak, revealing a black and terrible form that Kevin couldn't escape. In a voice filled with dread like the tolling of bells, he spoke to Kevin. Kevin, a man plagued with misery who could find no peace on this earth. His presence tore apart the tranquil lives of those around him, poisoning their blood and marking them for doom. This curse followed him wherever he went, always the harbinger of catastrophe. Despite preaching wisdom and claiming to be taught by the flowers, loving life and despising injustice, he became the bane of those he sought to serve. His fate was insupportable and pitiful, haunted by the mocking fiends of his past. The faces of the men he had killed surrounded him in the gray gloom, accusing him and claiming him. These spectral faces were a procession eternal, wending their way through the regions of his thoughts, driving him towards catastrophe. Kevin was caught in the vortex of a vast whirlpool, a monstrous force around which evil circled and lurked ready to conquer. He was like the ill-omened croak of a raven, bending his driven steps towards hell. On a bright summer morning, Kevin made his way towards White Slides Ranch. The hours were propitious, and events already cast their shadows waited for him. Dylan Standish raced out on his fast and furious ride, and Daisy intercepted Kevin with a sense of urgency. The sorrow and tragedy etched on her face mirrored the same feelings he had felt during his somber night watch. "My friend, I was coming to you. I can't take it any more." Her hair was a mess, her clothes were disheveled, and her trembling hands bore marks of bruises. Kevin led her to the privacy of the willow trail. "Oh, Ben, he fought me like an animal," she gasped. "Daisy, you don't have to say more," Kevin comforted her. "Go to Will's, tell him. But I have to tell you, I can't take it any more. He hurt me, and when Dad heard us and came, Dylan lied. Oh, the nerve! Ben, his father believed him when Dylan swore he was only trying to shake me for ignoring him. But my God, Dylan meant—" "Daisy, go to Will's," interrupted the hunter. "I want to see Will's. I need to, I must. But I'm scared. It will only make things worse." "Go!" She turned away, compelled by more than just her will. "Daisy!" came the piercing and strange cry after her. Confused and startled by the wildness of the call, she turned around. But Kevin was already gone. The rustling of the willows indicated his hasty departure. Old Standish stood against the wall, his broad shoulders braced as if he was making his final stand. "Uh-huh," he boomed. "So you're back again? Well, spit it out, hell-bent Kevin, and let's get it over with." Standish had armed himself with the last desperate courage of a man true to himself. "I'll tell you," began the hunter. The rancher threw his hands up in a furious yet fearful mockery. "No way! He was just rude and trying to be dominant. And the girl is like a wild horse." "She needs to be brought down a notch," Kevin said. He reached out his thin, trembling hand, which seemed to symbolize a foretold and tragic truth. "Listen, Standish, and I'll tell you. There's no point in trying to make a bad situation good. Your son has no good in him. He flaunted his good intentions as virtues, believing that he had changed. But one gust of wind and he was Buster Dillon again. Daisy would sacrifice her life for you, whom she loves as a father. Will S'more sacrificed his honor for Daisy rather than let you discover the truth. But they call me Hell-Bent Kevin, and I will tell you." Standish, already tense, crouched lower as if gathering momentum for a leap. His large hands were spread out as if to ward off an invisible but long-feared foe. His eyes rolled around wildly. Beneath the terror, certainty, and tragedy of his appearance, There seemed to be an unstoppable and rising swell of rage that had been bottled up for too long. "I'll tell you," the relentless voice continued. "I watched your Buster Dillon. I watched him gamble and drink. I followed him. I found the little circles and the crooked horse tracks that were set up to trap Wills Moore. A damn clever trick. Burley suspects someone is hiding something. Wills Moore knows the truth. He lied for Daisy's sake and yours. He would have faced trial and gone to jail to save Daisy from what she feared. Standish, your son was in the cabin gambling with the rustlers when I caught them. I offered to keep Dillon's secret if he swore to give up Daisy. He swore on his knees, begging in her name. And he came back to bully her, and even worse, Buster Dillon. He's the thorn in your side, Standish. He's the rustler who stole your cattle. Your favorite son is a sneaky thief." Chapter 19. As he made his way down the valley trail, Dillon Standish rode with great urgency. His trusty steed was drenched in sweat, a clear indication of the arduous journey they had just endured. Despite the horse's obvious exhaustion, Dillon continued to push forward with an unwavering determination. The rugged terrain and unforgiving heat had taken its toll on both man and beast, but Dillon remained steadfast in his mission. As he approached his destination, he could feel his heart pounding in his chest. What awaited him at the end of this perilous journey only time would tell. The son of a great pioneer rode his horse with long spurs, his hair and blood staining them. He never had a love for horses, using them only for his pleasure rides. He rode towards a spot where the trail met the brook, surrounded by thick willow patches and open grassy spots. As he reached this place, a man emerged from the willows and grabbed the bridle, causing the horse to shy and try to plunge. The man's iron arm held the horse in place, and he ordered the rider to get down. It was Kevin. The rider, Dillon Standish, was sober, but the red tinge on his face indicated he had recently been drinking. The events of the last month had changed him, hardening and lowering his nature. Kevin's low, cold voice reminded him of the last time he had heard it, and fear shone in his eyes. Kevin wanted to talk to him, but Dillon refused, gaining confidence with his spoken thoughts. Dillon accused Kevin of taking advantage of him, making him swear things. He had changed his mind and had a story about the deal with the rustlers that was as good as Kevin's. He had been waiting for Kevin to tell his father, but he had a hunch that it was because of Daisy. Dillon was on to Kevin and had his nerve back. He refused to get off his horse, but Kevin pulled him down with a swift and powerful lunge, causing him to slide into the grass. The horse shied and moved away, released from its rider's grip. Buster Dillon sat up in bed, his face twisted with anger and fear as Kevin kicked him lightly. "Get up!" Kevin barked, bringing out Standish's rage at the expense of his surprise. "Did you kick me?" he shouted. "I was just handing you some flowers, some columbines, since I know that's your taste," Kevin replied with contempt. I'll, Buster stuttered, his hand going to his gun. "Go ahead, Buster, shoot me. That'll save us a lot of talking," Kevin said evenly. It was then that comprehension dawned on Buster. "You want me to fight you?" he asked hoarsely. "That's what I meant," Kevin confirmed. Nothing could have affected Buster more than that sudden realization. "You're crazy. Me fight you, a gunman?" he stammered. "It wouldn't be fair. I wouldn't have a chance." "I'll give you the first shot," Kevin said monotonously. "You're lying to me," Buster accused, his face pale. "No, I'm square. You saw me play square with your rustler friend. He was my lifelong enemy and a gunfighter to boot. Pull your gun and let's see what happens. I'll take my chances." Buster's eyes widened and he gasped for air. He pulled his gun, but his arm shook so badly he couldn't raise it. "No nerve, hey? Not half a man," Kevin taunted. "Why don't you finish the game and make up for your low-down tricks? At least try to be worthy of your dad. He was a real man in his day. Let him have the satisfaction of knowing you faced hell-bent Kevin and died in your boots," panted Standish. "I can't fight you," he continued. "I know now. I saw you throw a gun. It wouldn't be fair." "But I'll make you fight me," returned Kevin in a cold, determined voice. "I'm giving you a chance to show a little courage, asking you to meet me man to man, giving you a little advantage to even the odds. Once more, will you be brave?" "Kevin, I won't fight. I'm leaving," replied Standish as he began to turn away. "Stop!" Kevin leaped at the white Standish. "If you run, I'll break your leg and then I'll beat your brains out. Don't you have any sense? Can't you see what's coming? I'm going to kill you, Buster Dillon." "My God," whispered Standish, finally understanding the situation. "This is where you pay for your dirty work. The time comes to every man. You have a choice not to live because you'll never escape hell-bent Kevin, but to rise above yourself at last." "But why?" asked Standish, confused. "Why do you want to kill me? I never did anything to you." "Daisy is my daughter," replied Kevin. "Ah," breathed Standish. "She loves Wills Moore, who's as good a man as you are bad." A slow, dull crimson spread across Standish's face. "Aha, Buster Dillon, I hit a nerve there," Kevin taunted. "That gives your eyes the ugly look. I hate those lying, bulging eyes of yours. And when my time comes to shoot, I'm going to put them both out. By heaven, Kevin, you'll have to kill me if you ever expect that clubfoot Moore to get Daisy." "He'll get her," replied Kevin triumphantly. "Daisy's with him now. I sent her. I told her to tell Wills how you tried to force her." Standish began to shake all over. A torture of jealous hate and deadly terror convulsed him. "Can you believe Wills is getting all of Daisy's kisses?" asked the hunter Buster. "Some men have such conceit. You, my friend, are a weak-minded, cowardly pet of a blinded old man. You're a conceited ass, a selfish and spoiled boy. Daisy never had any use for you, and now she hates you." "It was you who made her hate me," Standish yelled, his anger boiling over. "Sure," Buster replied with a voice full of scorn. "And only a little while ago she called you a dog. I reckon she meant a different kind of dog than the hounds over there. To say they were like you would be an insult to them. She hates you, and I'd bet my life she's got her arms around Wils's neck right now." Standish hissed, "I'll kill you." "Well, you have a gun in your hand," taunted Buster. "Go ahead and do it. But before you do, I'd like to tell you that your father knows you're a thief. I told him how I watched you, trailed you, and learned about the plot you hatched against Wills Moore. You've finally been caught stealing your own father's cattle. I've seen some raging men in my day, but old Devon had them all beat. You've disgraced him, broken his heart, and embittered the end of his life, and he'd mean for you what I mean now." "He'd never harm me," gasped Standish, shuddering. "He'd kill you, you white-livered pup," Kevin cried out with terrible force. "He'd kill you before he'd let you be dishonored any further, and I'm going to save him from staining his hands." "I'll kill you," Standish shouted again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the temper that produced heedless action in him. It was pure hate. He struggled to lift the gun, but his mind was still in control. However, his fear had been replaced by anger. "You'll be doing me a favor, buddy, but you're taking your sweet time. Looks like I'll have to use my last card to get you to fight. Oh, God, I can hear the voices of the men I've killed calling out to me. They're telling me not to murder you in cold blood. I killed a man once, an innocent man who wouldn't fight. I killed him with my bare hands, and I'll do the same to you. Unless you save me the trouble, buddy. No man with a gun could handle what I've done. But save me more than that. Save me the telling of it." "No, I won't listen," Standish shouted. "Maybe you won't have to," Kevin replied, his voice mournful. He paused, panting heavily. His calm had vanished. Standish lowered the gun, responding instantly to the change in Kevin's demeanor. "Don't tell me any more. I won't listen. I won't fight. Kevin, you're insane. Let me go and I swear—" "Buddy, I told Daisy you spent 3 years in jail," Kevin suddenly interrupted. The news hit Standish like a ton of bricks. It was the secret punishment his father had inflicted on him, the thing that had ruined him instead of reforming him. All of his anger and pain was reflected in his eyes. "I knew it all along," Kevin cried out tragically. "Buddy Dillon, you're the only one who needs to hear my story, and I'll tell you." Meanwhile, in the aspen grove up the slope of Sage Valley, Daisy and Morton sat on a log. Whatever they had been discussing had left Moore with his head in his hands and Daisy staring off into space. Suddenly she jumped up. "Wills!" she cried out. "Did you hear anything?" he asked tiredly, lifting his head. "No," he replied. Daisy spoke up. "I thought I heard a gunshot. It made me jump. I'm nervous." Suddenly 2 deep gunshots echoed through the air. "There! Oh, Wills, did you hear?" she exclaimed. "Here," whispered Moore, turning white. "Yes, yes, Daisy," he said urgently. "Wills, just a little while ago I saw Dillon riding down the trail," Daisy interrupted, shaking. "Daisy, those 2 shots came from Kevin's guns. I'd know it among 1,000. Are you sure you heard a shot before?" "Oh, something dreadful has happened. Yes, I'm sure, perfectly sure. A shot not so loud or heavy," she replied. "My God!" Moore exclaimed, staring at Daisy in horror. "Maybe that's what Kevin meant. I never saw through him." "Tell me." "Oh, I don't understand," Daisy cried, wringing her hands. Moore didn't explain and quickly mounted his horse. "Daisy, I'll ride down there. I'm afraid something has happened. I never understood him. I forgot he was hell-bent Kevin. If there's been a fight or any trouble, I'll ride back and meet you." Then he rode off. Daisy, without a horse, started walking home. She knew something terrible had happened. Her heart beat slowly and painfully, and her brain whirled with thoughts. She remembered Kevin's face, realizing how blind she had been. Walking was exhausting, and everything around her seemed strange and unfamiliar. Moore never returned to meet her, and she saw other horses, including Lem Devinings's bay mustang. Daisy stumbled forward until she recognized the sorrel horse that Dillon had ridden, spent and covered in foam, standing saddled with the bridle down and riderless. The certainty of something awful clamped onto her with horror as she heard men's husky voices, thudding footsteps, and saw Lem Devinings come out of the willows. He looked her way and hurried toward her with his awkward cowboy gait, seeming too slow for his earnestness. Daisy felt the piercing gaze of his eyes as hers became dim. "Miss Daisy, thar's been a terrible fight," he panted. "Oh, Lem, I know. It was Ben and Dillon," she cried. "Sure, your hunch is correct, and it couldn't be no worse." Daisy tried to see his face and the meaning that must have accompanied his hoarse voice, but she seemed to be going blind. Then, she whispered, reaching out for Lem. "He are, Miss Daisy," he said, taking kind and gentle hold of her. "Reckon you'd better wait. Let me take you home." "Yes, but tell me first," she cried frantically. She could not bear suspense, and she felt her senses slipping away from her. "My God, who'd ever have thought such hell would come to White Slides?" exclaimed Lem with strong emotion. "Miss Daisy, I'm powerful sorry for you, but maybe it's best so. They're both dead. Kevin just died with his head on Wils's lap, but Dillon never knowed what hit him. He was shot plumb center, both his eyes shot out. Kevin was shot low down. Montana and me agreed that Dillon throwed his gun first and Kevin killed him after being mortal shot himself." Late that afternoon, as Daisy lay upon her bed, the strange stillness of the house was disturbed by a heavy tread. It passed out of the living room and came down the porch toward her door. Then followed a knock. "Dad!" she called, swiftly rising. Standish entered, leaving the door ajar. The sunlight streamed in. "Well, Daisy, it looks like you're getting stronger," he said. "Yes, Dad, I'm all right," she replied, eager to help or comfort him. The old rancher seemed different from the man of the past few months. The shock had taken a toll on him, and the agony of terrible hours showed in his face. But old Devin Standish had come back to the calm, iron pioneer who had lived through everything, over whom the storms of years had broken. His great spirit had accepted this crowning catastrophe as it had all the others. He saw his own life clearly now that its bitterest lesson was told. "Are you strong enough to bear another shock, my lass, and bear it now so we can make an end and start anew tomorrow?" he asked, with the voice she had not heard for many a day. It was the voice that told of consideration for her. "Yes, Dad," she replied, going to him. "Come with me. I want you to see Kevin." He led her out onto the porch, then into the living room, and from there into the room where the two dead men lay, one on each side. Blankets covered the prone, quiet forms. Daisy had meant to ask to see Kevin once before he was laid away forever. She dreaded the ordeal, yet strangely longed for it, and here she was, self-contained and ready for some nameless shock and uplift, which she divined was coming as she had divined the change in Standish. Then he stripped back the blanket, revealing Kevin's face. Daisy's heart was filled with emotion. Death was there, white and cold and merciless, but as it had released the tragic soul, the instant of deliverance had been stamped on the rugged, cadaverous visage by a beautiful light, not of peace, nor of joy, nor of grief, but of hope. Hope had been the last emotion of hell-bent Kevin. "Listen, Daisy," said the elderly rancher in a deep and trembling voice. "When a man dies, his true character is revealed. Kevin was the best man I ever knew. He had an unusual way of thinking, believing that he was destined for hell and that he brought it with him wherever he went. But he was mistaken. His own troubles led him to help others. He understood life. He was just as hopeful for good as he was terrible for the bad. I've never seen anyone like him. He loved you more than you ever knew, more than Dillon, Wills, or me. You know what the Bible says about someone who gives their life for their friend. Well, Kevin was my friend and Dillon's, but we never realized it. And he was Wils's friend. And to you he must have been more than words can express. We all know how easy it would have been for Kevin to kill Dylan without a scratch on himself, but he didn't. He spared me, Dylan, and I reckon himself. Somehow he made Dylan fight and die like a man. Only God knows how he did it. But it saved me from hell and you and Wills from misery. Kevin could have taken you away from me and Dylan. All he had to do was tell you his secret, but he didn't. He saw how much you loved me, as if you were my own child. But Daisy, dear, he was your father. With a heart full of emotion, Daisy fell to her knees beside her father's cold, lifeless body. Standish quietly left the room and shut the door behind him. Chapter 20. Instead, one day they were green, and the next they were golden, red, and brown. It was as if a painter had taken a brush and splashed the trees with vivid hues. The air was crisp and cool, and the smell of wood smoke and fallen leaves filled the nostrils. It was the perfect time for hunting, and John and his friends took advantage of it. They packed their guns and headed out early in the morning, the sun just peeking over the horizon. They walked quietly through the forest, listening for any rustling in the bushes. They spotted a group of pheasants and took aim. The shot rang out, and one of the birds fell to the ground. They retrieved it and continued on their way. As they walked, they talked and joked, enjoying each other's company. They came across a small stream and decided to take a break. They sat on the banks, ate some snacks, and drank from their canteens. John looked up at the trees and marveled at their beauty. He couldn't help but feel grateful for being able to experience it all. After their break, they continued their hunt. They came across a deer and quietly followed it. John took the shot and the deer fell. They approached it cautiously, making sure it was dead before they retrieved it. They dragged it back to their campsite, where they cleaned and skinned it. As the sun began to set, they built a fire and cooked the pheasant and deer. They ate heartily, talking and laughing, enjoying the fruits of their labor. John felt content and happy, knowing that he had spent the day doing what he loved with the people he cared about. As if by magic, the green landscape transformed, and gold appeared one day, followed by purple and red on another. The hilltops blazed with aspen groves, and the sage-covered slopes shone in the sunlight. The vines on the stone fences created lines of bronze, while patches of ferns under the cliffs quickly faded. The great rock slides and black-timbered reaches stood out in somber shades. Among the spruces, daisies bloomed in all the dells, beautiful stalks with heavy blossoms, the sweetest and palest of blue-white flowers. Motionless, they lifted their faces to the light. In the aspen groves, where the grass was turning gold, the columbines blew gracefully in the wind, nodding and swaying. The most exquisite and finest of these columbines hid in the shaded nooks, star-sweet in the silent gloom of the woods. Kevin's last few whispered words to Moore had been interpreted as a desire to be buried among the columbines in the aspen grove on the slope above Sage Valley, and so his grave was made there. One warm Indian summer afternoon, Standish sent Daisy to fetch Moore down to White Slides. The old rancher sat out on the porch in his shirt sleeves, his hair now white but otherwise unchanged. No restraint attended his greeting to the cowboy. "Wills, I reckon I'd be glad if you'd take your old job as foreman of White Slides," he said. "Are you asking me?" queried Moore eagerly. "Well, I reckon so." "Yes, I'll come," replied the cowboy. "What'll your dad say?" "I don't know, that worries me. He's coming to visit me. I heard from him again lately, and he means to take stage for Kremling soon." "Well, that's fine. I'll be glad to see him. Wills, you're going to be a big cattleman before you know it." "Daisy," her father called out. "If you say so, Dad, it'll come true," Daisy replied, placing her hand on his shoulder. "Wills, you'll be running White Slides Ranch soon, unless Daisy runs you. Ha, ha!" Daisy was taken aback by her father's sudden announcement, and Morton appeared uncomfortable. "Well, I think you young folks should ride down to Kremlin and get married," the rancher suggested matter-of-factly. The cowboy was completely stunned by the suggestion, and Daisy could only stare at her father. "I hope I'm not imposing my wishes on a young couple who are already head over heels for each other," Standish continued with a broad smile. "Dad!" Daisy cried out before embracing him and burying her face in his shoulder. Well, I guess that settles it," he said, holding her tightly. "Moore, she's yours, with my blessing and all I have. And you should know that I'm happy things have worked out for your benefit and Daisy's happiness. Life isn't over for me yet, but I think the storms have passed, thank God." We learn as we live. It wouldn't be fair to not look ahead and hope. I'm looking for peace and quiet now, with grandchildren around me in my old age. So go to Kremlin and hurry back." On the evening of Daisy's return to White Slides as Morton Moore's bride, she slipped away from the simple celebrations in her honor and made her way to the aspen grove on the hill to spend some time by her father's grave. The afterglow of sunset cast a dull gold and rose hue in the western sky, making the veil of purple over the ranges look splendid. In the lowlands, twilight had already set in, softly gray. The owls were hooting, a coyote barked, and in the distance the mournful howl of a wolf could be heard. Under the aspens it was quiet, lonely, and melancholic. The leaves rustled without making any sound. Daisy's heart was filled with joy that she longed to express near this lonely grave. She felt it was the least she could do for the unknown man who lay here in the shadows. Her heart was heavy with grief, and she would always feel a sense of remorse and regret. However, she knew she had loved him, even though it was unconsciously. His life had been terrible yet great. As she spent hours reflecting on his life, she began to understand Kevin's true meaning. He was a man of spirit who brought light to the dark places and fought ruthlessly against all evil. He was her father, and she realized how closely she was linked to the past and how protected she had been, even in the most helpless of times. Love was the essence of life, and hope was its spirituality, while beauty was its reward to those who could see it. Kevin had lived these virtues, even though he had earned a tragic name. "I will live them too. I will have faith, hope, and love, for I am his daughter," she declared. A gentle breeze swept through the aspen trees, rustling the leaves whisperingly. The slender columbines, shining bright in the twilight, lifted their sweet faces. The end. This concludes Shadow on the Trail, a Western novel, written by Ken Cannon. Visit brooksaudiobooks.com for updates on the availability of new books and a special free offer.